Hi and welcome. It's been an amazing journey, and thank you for sticking with me for the past couple of months or weeks, depending on what point you joined Grow with Abisola Olabisi. So, today we're going to be doing a recap of the things that we've been learning in the past couple of weeks. And what is the theme? What has been the theme of the things that we have been learning? It has been that we have been exploring growth, we've been exploring healing, we've been exploring alignment and relationships. And whether this is your first time being here, whether this is your second or third or fourth, I'd like to let you know and remind you that this program is coming to you because of you. Yes, this is for you. And you haven't missed anything because today we'll be going over the things that we have learned about healing, about relationships, and about alignment. So, over the last few sessions, we've explored relationships from inside out, not just about who we are and not just about who we connect with, but especially about how we connect. We started with self, and let me tell you something. If you hear the word self, I'm sure that if you've been in religious settings, especially in church, you would know that we usually relate self with the flesh. And your preacher, your pastor would have always said, put away the flesh. Of course, that is true. But in this context, we're looking at self as a subject of individuality, as a persona, as who you are, as as an an identity. Yes, that word was taking its time to come out from me. So, over the last couple of months, we've looked at self, then we moved to family, then we looked at how friendships impact our identity or a personality or how we view the world. Then we looked at intimacy and attachments, that's love relationships and attachments. And finally, we moved to purpose and legacy. Tonight, it's about integration, or today, depending on the time that you're replaying this or if you're watching with me live this afternoon. Because here's what we discovered: the quality of your relationship will rarely exceed the quality of your self awareness. And remember that self awareness is ingrained in emotional intelligence. It's one of the five core pillars of emotional intelligence. So, if something stirred you during this series, if it touched a nerve, if it touched something in you and it made you ponder and think about the things that we've been learning, I want you to know that that's the beginning of growth. All right. So let's visit what we learned. Now, in the part one, we had talked about foundation, and this is a fundamental when we are looking at healthy relationships, when we're looking at healing and alignment. Now, we began with the most overlooked relationship of all, and that one is the one that you have with yourself. Now, we explored four layers of what my relationship with myself should typically look like or entail. We talked about identity, who we are, without the applause. We asked fundamental questions like, who are you without the applause? Who are you without performance? Who are you without being needed? Who are you in spite of or despite the name tags that you have been given as peacemaker, all kinds of things, or even the black sheep of the family? Now, when identity is unclear, relationships become stages for approval rather than spaces for connection. Emotional awareness was the next thing that we looked at in the relationship with ourselves. Can you name what you feel? Can you, or do you suppress or explode or avoid disagreements or conflict in your relationship? Do you remember how a situation made you feel? Can you trace back what made you feel the way you felt? We also looked at the fact that unacknowledged emotions don't disappear. They find a way to leak somehow in your tone, in your reaction, and in your expectations. Now we looked at another fundamental pillar of foundation to a successful relationship with yourself. We said it's boundaries. So, do you say yes when you mean to say no? Do you confuse access with love? Boundaries are not rejection, they're clarity. And I want you to hear this from me today, that boundaries teach others how to relate with you. And not just that, it also keeps the people who don't mean well away from you. Okay? Now, boundaries does not mean arrogance. It just means that you love yourself first enough and you respect yourself first enough to know what to accept and what to politely and firmly say no to. All right. So now, let's look at the subject of self trust. Do you honor your instincts or do you abandon yourself to keep the peace? Remember, we talked about self trust as a very important foundation in your relationship with yourself. Do you trust yourself enough? Do you honor your instincts or do you abandon yourself to keep the peace? And we said the way you treat yourself teaches people how they will treat you. And if self awareness is weak, every other relationship struggles. If self awareness is weak, it leads to what we call self abandonment. It means that you get to a point that you keep giving until you get to a point that you're exhausted without necessarily knowing when to stop. And that's one high point when it comes to health and living healthy. Without self trust, without knowing how much your body can take, there is a very good chance that you're going to suffer from burnout. You're going to experience irritability. Everybody gets a good share of whatever trouble, not trauma, that you're experiencing. Now we went on to the second part. In the second week in February, we talked about circles, we talked about family, and we talked about friendships. We moved into this conversation outside from, from relationship itself into the relationship that you have with your families. And we talked about circles. We said the people closest to you are the people that influence and inform how you see the world, patterns and trends, how you've handled conflict and communication in this relationship will affect and impact your worldview. And we confronted this truth that proximity does not equal health. Just because someone is family, just because someone has history with you, does not mean that the relationship is balanced, and it does not mean that it is life-giving. Then we explored family of origin patterns, how we handled conflict, how conflict is handled in the home, really. And then that will inform how we handle conflict. We talked about a reflection moment where you would have asked yourself, were my emotions safe? What role did you play in your family? Were you a rescuer? Did you play the role of a peacemaker? Were you the invisible one? And if you never questioned the role you were given, you may replay it even when it costs you. So we explored what we call friendship health. And we said mutuality should be reviewed versus one sidedness. And I remember I told us about what we call a parasitic relationship, just using and borrowing terms from biology versus a symbiotic relationship. as an individual, a person who has a good grasp of themselves, of who they are, their identity, you want to be aware, you want to steer clear and be conscious of your relationships, especially friendships that steer you away from a symbiotic, a mutually beneficial experience, and those relationships that put you into a parasitic relationship. We said you should look out for people who only reach out to you only when they need help. They never ask how you're doing, they never check in on you. Just me, 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 and what I can get from you. So we said your growth compatibility must be a thing that informs a symbiotic relationship, not stagnation. And that we said that you should examine your emotional safety around these people. Do they challenge you? Do they cheer you on? Or they just find every opportunity or every news of your success is like a standpoint of competition? So we said again that longevity does not equal alignment, and history does not guarantee future health. Remember, we told you, I mentioned that you should be on the lookout for unspoken contracts. And if you cast your mind back, you remember how we talked about the movie where people say they help you because they expect you to give something in return, and they say you owe me one. So I'm always there for you, so you owe me. Watch out for I stay silent, so don't challenge me. Every relationship must register both opinions in a healthy way. All right. So sometimes people stay silent because they want to avoid conflict, or because the reception to the truth that was given in the first instance was not well received. Okay, as a matter of truth, if you're ever going to form friendship with anyone, if the person is only interested in what you can give rather than your growth and progress, that is definitely not friendship. And you, who is also in a friendship, must also be welcoming, must be open to accepting correction, especially hearing the truth. Remember, it is not truth that hurts, it is the reception of truth that really hurts. All right. We're not talking about bashing each other's emotions, destructive criticism. No, we're talking about a healthy review of how we have been or who we are from a healthy standpoint or point of view. So, love without honesty becomes control, and loyalty without boundaries become resentment. So we learned that growth sometimes changes access, and distance is not dishonor. Because you're staying away from a dysfunctional system does not mean that you dishonor the system or the people or the person that you're staring clear from. So in part three, we looked at intimacy and love and romance, especially because it was, the month of February is often tagged with the month of love, and people needed to understand the right perspective when it comes to a love relationship. So we stepped into one of the most vulnerable spaces, which is romantic love. We asked, have you ever loved deeply and still felt unseen? And we confronted this truth that love does not heal what you refuse to acknowledge. Love does not heal what you refuse to grow out of. So, and we confronted that truth and we explored attachment styles. We talked about avoidant attachment. This attachment runs from closeness. We also looked at anxious attachment. This attachment fears abandonment. We also looked at a secure attachment. This style of attachment communicate needs. So you don't choose your attachment styles, but you are responsible for healing it. And then we move to the most, I think, exciting part of this, if live session back then, was about chemistry and compatibility. We talked about chemistry being attraction, and we said attraction is instant, but attraction is not enough to sustain a love relationship. Many love relationships fail because they've only rested on the attraction part. You know, they've only loved the way, they liked the butterflies and the belly and all the things, fun things that come with romantic relationship. But we said it's alignment that really matters, and it's alignment that takes time to build. Now, if we don't heal from traumatizing experiences before, there is a very good chance that we're going to feel like we're attracted, or we're going to actually attract the types of experiences unconsciously, the patterns of relationships that we have had. Have you often heard people who say, "Oh, I feel I'm unlucky in love. I'm always dating the same types of guys." It's because there is a re-engineering that needs to happen in the mind. And remember, the Bible is such a complete scripture. It's a complete book that talks about the fact that as a man thinks, so is he. So if you find yourself attracting the same type of relationship, there could be a trauma bond there that needs to be broken. And trauma bonds are broken, through your consciousness now and awareness that you don't have to repeat the same patterns as you have experienced before. All right. And remember, intensity is not intimacy. Oh, you are the butter in my bread, the sugar in my tea, the I can't live, I can't breathe. We call romantic love a cardio respiratory kind of love. It's only in the chest. It does not really translate to something that is long and sustainable. So, compatibility, I often also hear people say, "Oh, we're so compatible. We're so, and people also break up because of compatibility." Let me tell you something about compatibility. You may have similarities with someone, but compatibility is built, compatibility is developed, compatibility is what you grow into and what both of you grow into to align, to ensure alignment. Of course, you can share values on the basis of your faith. You can share some familiarities or similarities with your, growing up experience, but that's not enough to form a lasting and thriving relationship. We looked at communication patterns. Do people just go silent when conflict arises? Do you just, throw in sarcasm there? Do you shut down ultimately? Unspoken expectations will create disappointment, as well as unexpressed needs will create resentment. Then we looked at the love myths. We said that we should never say, "Oh, love should be effortless." Absolutely, love should be effortless, but it requires intentionality to actually make it work. And we said, never say, "If they love me, they will change," because people don't change because they love you. They change because they see a need to. And sometimes they will change for their partners when they see the impact of what they are doing on, the health of the relationship and of their partners. But the most important factor about change is that people change. Don't change unless they see a need to. So, love never demands perfection. That's the truth. But it requires responsibility. So, healthy relationship is intentional, not accidental. Now we moved to the fourth part about purpose and growth and legacy. We finally zoomed out and zoomed back in to say relationships are not just about now, they are about direction. And we asked, who are you becoming? And who can grow with that version of you? We explored growth misalignment. Sometimes we said sometimes relationships struggle not because of betrayal, but because of transformation. And we said that growth does not break relationships, it is misalignment that breaks relationships. We talked about purpose, compatibility. We asked, do people in your life celebrate your growth or do they tolerate it? Anything that requires you to shrink your calling will eventually cost you peace. Then we said you must begin to think legacy. You don't just leave possessions behind, you also leave patterns behind. And the question is, what kind of relational patterns are you leaving behind? Here's what this entire series has taught me, and here's what it reveals. If you lack self awareness, you are going to repeat patterns. If you ignore family dynamics, you will replay roles. If you avoid attachment healing, you will recreate instability. And if you neglect purpose, you will misalign your future. So, healthy relationships are not accidental. They require awareness, they require boundaries, they require responsibility, and most of all, they require alignment. So, let me leave you with this: you are allowed to grow. You are allowed to change, and you are allowed to choose relationships that reflect who you are becoming. And you are allowed to build intentionally. So let's close with this declaration. Say, put your hands over your heart or wherever you feel you can connect. Say, I choose awareness over denial. I choose alignment over approval. I choose healthy relationships over familiar chaos. I choose growth that builds legacy. So, if this series has impacted you, I want you to reflect on these questions. What is one relational pattern that I am ready to break? Thank you for walking this journey with us and walking with me. Of course, we have a community that takes you all through this journey of growth without feeling judged and without feeling, overwhelmed. In that community, it is absolutely safe and absolutely free to connect. So, why don't you go ahead and click the link in my bio or click the link in the comment section? It will take you directly into the school platform. Remember, it's a community of intentional people looking to grow like you. So, let's go towards what we have learned today. I also want you to ask yourself, what is one relational pattern that I'm ready to break? Thank you for walking this journey. And this is not the end, it's the beginning of building differently. Follow us on YouTube at Grow with Abisola Olabisi. And if you are watching on Facebook, please hit the following button or connection button. If you're watching on Instagram, hit the follow button and like a few videos on all these platforms so that it can reach people like you who are willing to learn, unlearn, and relearn. Until the next time, ciao, bye.